Have you ever paused to consider the deeper meaning behind your birth month? At first glance, it might seem like nothing more than a date on a calendar, a coincidence, a fact of paperwork. But what if it holds something more, something symbolic, something psychological? Could the month you were born actually carry emotional and archetypal significance that subtly shapes who you are? Let's be clear from the outset, this isn't about astrology, fortune-telling, or superstition. This is about depth psychology. Specifically, the insights of Carl Jung, one of the most influential minds in modern psychology. Jung believed that the unconscious speaks in symbols, that we as individuals are shaped not only by our environment and upbringing, but also by universal patterns he called archetypes. These archetypes show up in dreams, myths, behaviors, and yes, even in the symbolic cycles of nature. Think about it, if the seasons carry their own psychological rhythms, their own moods and messages, isn't it possible that the time of year you enter the world might leave an energetic imprint on your personality? This video isn't about labeling people or fitting you into a box. It's about understanding symbolic patterns that might offer clarity about your emotional tendencies, inner strengths, and life challenges. It's an invitation to reflect, not predict, to discover, not define. So let me ask you again, what month were you born in? That answer might hold more meaning than you ever imagined. Over the course of this journey, we'll explore how each month of the year, January through December, carries a different symbolic energy. These aren't stereotypes, they're mirrors. Jung saw each month as aligned with a certain archetype, a psychological theme tied to the natural world and the cycle of human growth. You're about to discover that your birth month is not just a date, it may be a doorway, a way to better understand your patterns, your potential, and perhaps even your soul's deeper story. Let's begin at the beginning, the quiet, reflective stillness of January, the month of the sage. To truly understand the deeper meaning behind your birth month, we need to step into the mind of one of the most revolutionary thinkers in psychology, Carl Gustav Jung. Jung wasn't just a psychologist, he was a seeker, a deep diver of the human soul. He introduced concepts that change the way we understand the psyche, the archetypes, the persona, the shadow, and perhaps most profoundly, the collective unconscious. Unlike Freud, who focused largely on personal history and internal conflict, Jung expanded the field into the symbolic, the mythological, and the universal. He believed that embedded within each of us is an unconscious layer of inherited memory stories, images, and emotional truths that have accumulated over generations. This is a collective unconscious, and it's filled with recurring patterns of human experience, what Jung called archetypes. But how does this relate to your birth month? Jung believed that time itself, especially natural, cyclical time, plays a psychological role in our development. He observed that the seasons, with their distinct energies and symbolic movements, mirror the journey of the human spirit. Just as nature goes through phases, birth in spring, growth in summer, decay in autumn, rest in winter, so too does the human psyche. And where you enter the cycle of your birth month may subtly attune your emotional rhythm to the energy of that time. In Jungian terms, every month can be viewed as a psychological archetype, a symbolic stage in the great wheel of transformation. These are not rigid categories, but rich metaphors that help us understand the flow of life, from the emergence of the innocent child to the wisdom of the elder, from the drive of the warrior to the inward journey of the mystic. Each month, then, is more than a marker time, it's a symbolic initiation. It introduces you to a psychic atmosphere, a backdrop of emotional themes, struggles, and potentials. Jung once said, "Who looks outside dreams, who looks inside awakens." When we explore the symbolic timing of our entry into the world, we begin to see our birth not just as a biological event, but as a mythological moment, a meaningful point in the cycle of life that continues to echo throughout our inner world. Now that we've laid the foundation, let's begin exploring each month in depth, starting with January, the month of solitude, structure, and inner wisdom. Think of your birth month as a kind of symbolic signature, an energetic imprint shaped by the conditions of the natural world at the moment you entered it. Were you born in the cold stillness of winter, when the earth sleeps and everything turns inward? Or did you arrive with the fiery sun of midsummer, when life is bursting with motion and intensity? These aren't just poetic metaphors. They are psychological mirrors, reflecting the energy that surrounded you as you took your first breath. Carl Jung believed that symbolic environments influence how we perceive and experience life. And time, the rhythm of nature, is one of the deepest symbolic environments we all share. Our first exposure to the world happens in a very specific context: the temperature, the light, the collective mood of nature at that moment. This isn't about astrology. It's not about fate, prediction, or labeling anyone. In fact, quite the opposite. This is about opening a reflective space, a lens through which you can better understand your unique inner world. You see, each month holds a particular kind of energy, not in a mystical sense, but in a very real, experiential one. Think about how January feels quiet, cold, restrained compared to July, which radiates heat, movement, and intensity. These energies are not just external. They shape the psychological climate we are born into. Your birth month, then, can serve as a doorway into your own emotional blueprint. It's a symbolic introduction to life, a backdrop that may have shaped your instincts, your sensitivities, your sense of rhythm. But let's be clear, this isn't deterministic. This doesn't mean you're defined by your birth month. Jung was never interested in putting people in boxes. His approach was always about individuation, the process of becoming more fully yourself. And sometimes, understanding the symbolic terrain you were born into can help you navigate your path with greater awareness. What we're about to explore in this video is a symbolic map, 12 archetypal energies, one for each month of the year. Each of these archetypes reflects a particular way of being, a unique psychological tone. So as we begin this journey, I invite you to approach it not as a set of rules, but as a mirror way to look within and ask deeper questions. Who are you beneath the surface? What hidden patterns guide your thoughts, your choices, your longings? Let's begin this exploration with January, and the archetype of the sage, a soul shaped by winter's silence, seeking wisdom in solitude. Let's begin with the deep winter months, a time when nature is quiet, the earth is resting, and introspection comes more naturally. Those born in this season often carry something of that silence within them. January, the sage. If you were born in January, you may carry the archetype of the sage. This is the energy of wisdom, restraint, and inner discipline. Much like the frozen landscape outside, January-born individuals often appear composed, mature beyond their years, and deeply thoughtful. The sage sees the world through a lens of structure and responsibility. There's a quiet seriousness here, a tendency to value order, tradition, and purpose. These individuals are often cautious, deliberate, and highly capable in leadership or mentoring roles. But with this gift comes a challenge. The sage can become too rigid. There's a risk of emotional dryness, of clinging too tightly to logic and control. The lesson here is to soften, to trust the process of life rather than trying to always manage it. Learning to let go, to laugh more freely, to embrace the unpredictability of human emotion, these are key steps on the sage's path toward wholeness. February, the visionary. February carries a very different kind of energy, more experimental, unconventional, and future-oriented. If this is your birth month, your archetype may be the visionary. The visionary thrives on ideas. There's often a brilliance to those born in February, desire to break molds, challenge the status quo, and dream of better worlds. These individuals are fiercely independent, deeply creative, and often drawn to innovation, art, or humanitarian causes. But this freedom-loving nature can come at a cost. The visionary sometimes feels like an outsider, misunderstood, or emotionally distant. There's a kind of existential loneliness that can creep in the feeling of seeing too far ahead while others are still caught in the present. The healing journey for the visionary is about grounding, finding community, connecting emotionally, and translating abstract ideas into tangible action. March, the dreamer. As the ice begins to melt and spring whispers its arrival, we come to March and the archetype of the dreamer, or, in some traditions, the reborn. March-born souls are often highly intuitive, sensitive, and deeply connected to nature's rhythms. There's a softness to them, a poetic inner world rich with imagination and empathy. They often feel things before they understand them, and their emotional depth can be both a blessing and a burden. The dreamer lives between worlds, the visible and the invisible, the known and the mysterious. This makes them gifted artists, healers, or spiritual seekers. But it also makes them vulnerable to losing themselves in fantasy, in emotional overwhelm, or in the needs of others. Their path is one of integration, learning to navigate both inner and outer realities without becoming unmoored. When grounded, the dreamer brings incredible compassion and creativity to the world. From the wise restraint of the sage to the radical imagination of the visionary and the poetic depth of the dreamer, these first three archetypes reveal the richness of winter's psychological terrain. Next, we'll journey into the full bloom of spring, where energy rises and life awakens. Let's explore the archetypes of April through June, the pioneer, the nurturer, and the storyteller. As we move into spring, the season of birth, momentum, and outward expansion, we encounter a surge of dynamic psychological energy. These months are alive with possibility, and those born during this time often reflect that same rising life force. April, the warrior. If you were born in April, your archetype may be the warrior, a figure of action, courage, and passion. You are likely full of drive, boldness, and an instinct to move forward. Like spring's first bloom pushing through frozen ground, you carry within you a force that refuses to be stopped. April-born individuals are often natural leaders, fiercely independent and unafraid of confrontation. There's fire here, a willingness to fight for what matters, to initiate, to inspire. But fire can burn out quickly. The warrior's greatest challenge is learning patience, to avoid burnout, to not rush ahead without clarity, and to honor emotional balance alongside ambition. Your path involves learning to channel your intensity with purpose and restraint. With maturity, you become not just a fighter but protector, a champion of justice and meaningful change. May, the builder. Those born in May embody the steady, grounding presence of the builder. As the earth grows fertile and the world becomes lush with life, so too do May-born individuals seek stability, beauty, and tangible results. The builder archetype is practical, devoted, and deeply sensual. You likely value consistency, comfort, and craftsmanship, whether in work, relationships, or personal passions. There's something enduring about your presence, something that brings calm to the chaos. Yet, this devotion to order can become a trap. The builder's shadow is rigidity, a fear of change, a reluctance to let go of what's familiar. You may resist disruption, even when it's needed for growth. Your journey is about embracing flexibility, realizing that true stability doesn't come from holding everything still, but from flowing with life while keeping your values intact. June, the seeker. June marks the threshold of summer, a time of curiosity and exploration, and those born in this month often carry the spirit of the seeker. The seeker is intellectually agile, adaptable, and endlessly inquisitive. If this is your archetype, you may be someone who thrives on communication, travel, learning, and connecting with new ideas. You crave variety and thrive on mental stimulation. But with such expansiveness comes a tendency to scatter. The seeker can struggle with commitment, bouncing from one interest to another without ever truly settling. The deeper lesson here is about depth over breadth, choosing not just to explore, but to go inward, to stay present long enough to uncover meaning. When balanced, The seeker becomes a brilliant guide, someone who not only asks great questions, but also finds profound answers. From the fiery courage of the warrior to the dependable grace of the builder and the intellectual wanderlust of the seeker, spring's archetypes remind us that growth comes in many forms. Next, we enter the high heat and passion of summer. The leader, the magician, and the lover await. As the sun reaches its zenith and then slowly begins to descend, we move through a psychological arc that mirrors emotional maturity, leadership, and deep introspection. The archetypes of July, August, and September reflect the full range of this journey, from the warmth of emotional care to the clarity of discernment. July, the nurturer. If you were born in July, your archetype may be the nurturer, a deeply empathetic and emotionally intuitive soul who finds strength in caring for others. You often carry a warmth that feels like home to those around you. You may feel naturally drawn to family, community, or causes that involve nurturing and emotional connection. Your presence can be a sanctuary, a place where others feel safe, seen, and supported. But the nurturer can also forget themselves in the service of others. Your challenge lies in emotional self-preservation, learning that caring for yourself is not selfish, but essential. You may suppress your needs or emotions to keep the peace, but over time, this builds quiet resentment or emotional fatigue. Your growth begins when you realize the best caretakers are those who first learn to care deeply for their own inner world. August, the sovereign. August-born individuals often embody the sovereign and natural leader who radiates confidence, presence, and charisma. This archetype is all about stepping into the spotlight with purpose and inspiring others through personal power. You might feel compelled to lead, to express boldly, to influence the world around you with strength and conviction. At your best, you are generous, courageous, and commanding, but the sovereign must also watch the shadow of ego. The desire to be admired can morph into pride. The need to control can overshadow collaboration. Your greatest lesson? True leadership comes from humility. When you lead with empathy, not just authority, you become not just powerful, but wise. The sovereign is not a ruler above others, but a steward of the greater good. September, the analyst. If you were born in September, your archetype may align with the analyst, a master of detail, structure, and insight. You likely have a deep appreciation for systems, order, and thoughtful reflection. You thrive when things make sense. You enjoy improving processes, solving problems, and creating clarity in chaos. Your mind is sharp, your standards high, but this strength can become a burden when perfectionism takes over. The analyst can become overly critical of themselves, of others, of the world. Flexibility becomes a missing piece. Your growth lies in embracing imperfection, allowing life to be messy, beautiful, and incomplete. When the analyst softens, what emerges is deep wisdom, a clarity that sees both the logic and the mystery of life. Together, the nurturer, the sovereign, and the analyst form a triad of emotional intelligence, personal power, and intellectual depth. This arc reminds us that being human means learning to balance heart, strength, and mind. Next, we enter the final quarter of the cycle, a time of inner reckoning, transformation, and surrender. The mystic, the alchemist, and the sage reborn await. As we enter the final quarter of the symbolic year, the energies shift from the clarity of intellect to the mystery of integration and closure. The archetypes of these months are not simply about personality. They are about the soul's journey toward harmony, evolution, and wisdom. October, the harmonizer. Those born in October often resonate with a harmonizer, a soul deeply attuned to beauty, peace, and relational balance. You are likely someone who values fairness, aesthetics, and emotional equilibrium in all aspects of life. You may find yourself naturally gifted in diplomacy and social grace. People gravitate toward your calming energy and your ability to see both sides of any situation. You may have a strong eye for symmetry both in art and in relationships. But the harmonizer's challenge is to face authentic conflict. In the quest to keep peace, you might suppress discomfort, avoid confrontation, or please others at the expense of your truth. This avoidance can create hidden tension and emotional imbalance. True harmony doesn't come from avoidance, it comes from courage. Your evolution begins when you learn that honesty, even when uncomfortable, is a deeper form of peace. November, the Transformer. November births often align with the Transformer, an intense, enigmatic archetype that thrives on emotional depth, psychological transformation, and hidden truths. You may carry a magnetic presence, a depth that draws people in. You are not afraid to enter the darker corridors of the human experience, grief, loss, betrayal, and emerge changed, wiser, more whole. But with great depth comes vulnerability. The Transformer can become trapped in emotional shadows, obsession, jealousy, or cynicism. The pain of the past can harden the heart, if not transmuted. Your power lies in alchemy, the ability to turn pain into growth, to die metaphorically and be reborn. When you embrace your wounds instead of hiding them, you become a beacon of transformation for others. December, the Elder Sage. And finally, those born in December often embody the Elder Sage, a soul rooted in wisdom, optimism, and visionary leadership. You may possess a natural philosophical outlook, a love for ideas, freedom, and meaning. People may see you as a guide, someone who inspires others to dream bigger, reach higher, or seek truth beyond the obvious. But this archetype must be careful not to float too far above reality. Living too much in ideals can lead to detachment. The Elder Sage can become so focused on the big picture that they miss the details right in front of them. Your growth lies in grounding your wisdom. When the sage walks with both sky and soil vision and practicality, they become truly whole. Not just wise, but accessible. Not just idealistic, but impactful. These final three archetypes represent closure, transcendence, and spiritual maturity. They remind us that every psychological cycle ends not in endings, but in rebirth through honesty, transformation, and wisdom. And now, we've completed the full circle from the contemplative depth of January Sage to the liberated perspective of December's Elder Sage. But this isn't just about months or symbols. It's about understanding the deeper rhythms that shape who we are and who we're becoming. Are you ready to reflect on what your birth month has been trying to show you all along? After exploring the symbolic essence of each month, one truth becomes clear. Your birth month does not define you, it illuminates you. Carl Jung never intended his archetypes to be cages. In fact, the very heart of his philosophy was liberation through awareness. Archetypes aren't boxes you're placed into, they are mirrors held up to help you see your deeper patterns and potentials. Your birth month, with all its psychological and seasonal symbolism, acts as a starting point, not an ending. It's like a compass, it points you towards certain inclinations, but it does not limit where you can go. As Jung himself might say, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. That's what this journey has been about, not to assign you a label, but to help you uncover the hidden patterns that may be quietly shaping your decisions, your fears, your desires, and your dreams. Each archetype we've explored is an invitation, a lens to explore how the outer world you were born into may have echoed the inner world you were destined to explore. Think of it this way. Were you born in a time of fire and blooming life? You may feel a drive to act, to lead, to expand. Was your first breath taken in a season of quiet reflection? Then perhaps your soul came into this world with a message of wisdom or transformation. But remember, you are more than a symbol. You are a living story. And like all great stories, yours is shaped not just by where it begins, but by how you choose to grow. Your month of birth is not a prison. It is a mythic map filled with symbols, clues, and energies that, when understood, can guide you toward greater self-awareness, creativity, and peace. So instead of asking, what does my birth month say about me? Maybe the real question is, how can I grow into the highest version of what the symbol represents? Take a moment, breathe. Now ask yourself, what did I discover about myself today? Was there something in your birth month's archetype that resonated with you? A forgotten part of you that was quietly nodding along as you listened? This journey has not been about placing you into a category. It's been about revealing your layers. It's about realizing that you are part of a greater rhythm, and that rhythm might just be whispering secrets about your deepest self. Maybe you saw yourself in the visionary of February, or felt understood by the seeker June. Maybe you carry the fierce heart of April's warrior, or the gentle empathy of July's nurturer. Whatever you recognize, know that this is a starting point for deeper reflection. Because once you see a pattern, you have the power to reshape it. Once you understand where you come from, you can more consciously choose where you're going. Your birth month isn't your fate. It's a window, a symbol, a psychological climate you emerge from. And symbols, as Jung taught us, are bridges, connecting the conscious to the unconscious, the outer world to the inner one. So, as you walk away from this video, I invite you to carry these questions with you. How does the symbolism of my birth month show up in my choices, my relationships, my struggles? What archetype am I growing into? What part of me have I been ignoring that now deserves to be seen? And if this journey has sparked insight for you, share it. Tell us in the comments, what is your birth month? And did its archetype reflect something real within you? Your voice could be the mirror someone else needs. And if you found value in this exploration, please take a second to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you won't miss our upcoming deep dives into psychology, symbolism, and personal growth. Because the journey doesn't end here. It's just beginning. As Carl Jung once said, the path of individuation begins when you stop asking, who should I be? And start asking, who have I always been? Thank you for being here. Until next time, stay curious, stay grounded, and never stop exploring the depths of your inner world.